Well, we're now live and in living color. We have a very, let's say, timely discussion today about language learning. We have actually talked about this in the past, and that subject comes up because a lot of people don't really have facility, even in their native language, let alone a second language. They struggle with language, period. And so a lot of times when people actually hear another language, their brain kind of scrambles because they're trying to make sense of something they have no way to make sense of. So the idea of learning another language can be quite a hurdle to get past the idea of just thinking about a language and what goes into learning a second language. And there's a lot that goes into doing that. The other thing that's really important about learning another language is that you can't divorce a language from the culture that it came from. It's just not possible. And the reason is because any language is based on common experiences, and mutual feelings about things, because all language have subjects. They have verbs. The other stuff might be sometimes they have them, sometimes they don't, but they're going to have a subject and they're going to have a verb, because if you're not doing anything and you're not talking about a thing, then there's no point to have a language, So how you feel about those things will depend on, you may use a word for dog, for example. Now, in this culture, a dog is a pet and something that's very closely connected to family life often. In Papua New Guinea, dogs are food. They have pigs as pets, their dogs are food. In some cultures, dogs are the kind of things that's they're just taboo. They're the worst things. And so the dog represents kind of a low form of life. All the people are saying a word for dogs, but what they mean by that can be quite different. So how people say something and what they mean by a word has a lot to do with the mutual experience of the people who speak that language. So that's why it's really important for cultures to have a language. It's a way to share something between themselves and to have a certain unity of reality. To that end, we have, I think we have 3 people. Do we miss somebody, Jamie?
I don't believe that Alan has joined yet.
Okay, that's why I thought Alan was coming, but I didn't know if he had a substitute. But we do have Jamie and Shania. I'm thinking I'm saying your name right. And we're going to be talking today about the Lakota Language. I think it's a center, right?
It's considered a consortium.
A consortium. I knew there was a C in there, but I forgot what the C was there for a moment. And we're going to be talking about the consortium itself, so that you have a sense of what's being done, the infrastructure. And we're going to be talking about the hurdles of what it takes to set up something like that, what people experience when they're learning a language, what are some of the difficulties, both in learning and also in teaching the language. But first, we're going to get introduced to Jamie and Shania. Did I say your name right, Shania? Because some people say Shania. What is it? Is it Shania?
Yeah, it's Shania after Shania.
Oh, oh, hey, why didn't I think of that? Okay, so let's start off by Jamie, if you can give us a 50,000-foot view of who is Jamie Marquez Bratcher.
Sure thing. Well, I am Oglala Lakota. I'm a language learner, a wife, a mother. I'm an avid crafter. I actually finished my first quilt last night. And I've been working with the Lakota Language Consortium since April of 2021 as a digital media specialist. So I coordinate social media posts, manage community interactions, put on events, help educate the public, teachers, and then I do a little bit of everything for them, it feels like some days.
Okay, so that's what you're doing now. Tell us something about where you came from. Where were you born, and
Sure.
what made you Jamie as you know it today?
Oh goodness. Well, I wasn't prepared for that. My parents both met in the military, and after they were done being stationed in Germany, we moved back to the United States. My mom is Oglala Lakota, and she was largely raised off the reservation. So she was not raised on the Pine Ridge Reservation where her mother and grandmother were from. And my father is Hispanic. And so we have obviously two rich cultures. And then I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and worked in, most of my career has been in sales. And so I've worked in very technical environments. I sold business telephone systems in the cloud for many, many years. My husband started a business doing marketing automation over 10 years ago, and I started working with him, but quickly found that working with your spouse is not always ideal, and B, that there was actually opened up a lot of time availability for me to be exploring things that I was passionate about. And so it was nice to be able to kind of make a shift and facilitate doing things that I was passionate about and making a difference in communities that I care about, versus kind of working in that corporate environment.
Thank you. Shania, we're going to ask you the same question. Who are you now, and how did you become whoever you are now?
So my name is Shania Black Bear Serby. I am a Sicangu Lakota. I'm a ribbon skirt maker. I come from Two Strikes, South Dakota, and I've been a Lakota language learner for several years, actually, because of Alan Wilson. We met at somebody's going away party, and we kind of got to hear like a little bit of the language, and he was offering classes, and it kind of opened up this whole world that I knew that my grandpa, Ben Black Bear Jr., he was a part of all this stuff, but I didn't know how to become a part of that world. You feel like you had to get introduced by somebody. So Alan was doing those classes, and Lakota language kind of became a bigger part of my life. But I've been assisting with teaching language weekends since 2019. And I officially began working with the LLC as an assistant digital media specialist this past September. And yeah, I really like working alongside it because it kind of gives me that connection to my own family. Like I get to talk with my grandpa in Lakota, and we get to work on these things together, and it's really nice. But also, like, I have a lot of friends involved in this community. So I don't know. I'm really thankful for it.
Has your grandpa told you about the poem he wrote in Lakota?
He wrote a poem in Lakota?
Yeah. He
wow.
didn't tell you about that?
No,
it's
actually a super spy.
Well, anyway, it's on the YouTube channel. We made a film of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a long time ago. I worked with him in a class, and we made some poetry in Lakota, and
Wow.
and he's on that. Not only doing the poem, but he translates it too. And he was one of the kind of like the key people in helping that experience. So it might be something that you guys can revive and do something with.
He was actually
So-
talking about stuff like that, that we need to be able to be creative, and this is what helps like the language thrive, is
Yeah.
having it in these different art forms and getting people's words out there in music,
Exactly.
poetry, like
Exactly.
art. Yeah.
Exactly. That was the whole idea of that workshop up at Sitting Bull College that he and I did together. Yeah. So go on, look up my website, and then Lawrence Diggs on the not website but the YouTube channel, and then just put in Lakota language, and then on my, and it'll come up. I thought it was an interesting project, and I would like to see it. Something else happened with it, but we can talk about that later. Alan is on the line. Alan, are you there? There he is.
Amita kiapi dawa chia kapi. Kotiapi giglaga machiapi or shitia Alan Wilson machiapi. Mani tu ikchamana yamnyake mashakoi. Koliapi unspekia hemacha cha mani tu shagloga koliapi unspemichiche cha Lahome, St. Francis Indian School, Al Washia Chamu. Well, Yushkia wa chia kapi na dayam wahielo na yuha chante washte na pechu zaplo. Lawrence, I remember you. See if I remember. Okay, I was at Sitting Bull College when that happened. When you guys were doing that.
Oh yeah.
Vinegar Man.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Fluent in Japanese. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just a little background on myself. I also, if you guys knew any Lakota, I said Shania was going to buy us all pizza if you respond. But I grew up here in Rosebud as well. My mom's from the Rosebud Indian Reservation here in South Dakota. My dad's from Pine Ridge. He's Oglala Lakota. And I necessarily didn't start out as a Lakota language teacher. I didn't intend to be a teacher. It just kind of was a calling, if you will. I ended up, I wanted to be a history teacher, history and culture teacher, kind of along the lines of what some elders have done around here, just because we have a really rich history here in Rosebud and Native Americans in general. However, in 2015, I attended the Lakota Summer Institute at Sitting Bull College. Yeah, and 2015. And I always felt for years that I could never learn Lakota. There was just so many intricate little parts that, and the way it was explained was like, I'm never going to get it right, But when I went up there, it was actually really eye-opening, and it was actually really awesome to be able to actually speak and practice speaking, and it kind of pulled on a lot of stuff I knew growing up, and it also made me aware of certain little slangs we have on the res. I've always said that I didn't even know were part of Lakota until I started studying Lakota. So yeah, from there my path took off, and whatever I learned at Sitting Bull for 3 weeks, actually, they were generous enough to let me use their material. Excuse me. So I began hosting free classes back here on Rosebud, anywhere I can get it out. I was even volunteering at the jail, all just donating my time here and there. That's how I met Shania. I think it was Mike's going away party, wasn't it?
It was Deborah's.
Oh, was it Dwar's? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was
throwing language and salad bowl.
Oh, right. Okay, now I remember. Yeah. So, but yeah, from that moment on, I just really wanted to push and help and get the word out there that people can actually learn Lakota. There's materials out there. There's enough out there to learn Lakota that it's possible. So it's taken me, I did finish my college degree, but I'm actually finishing up a master's in Native American languages and linguistics. So,
yeah.
that has been quite the journey. But I'm really glad to be here. And yeah, here I am.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot for that. And thanks for all of you, all three of you, for being on with us today, because I think we have a lot to learn from you. And I want to remind our esteemed panel here that this is an interactive program, and we're hoping that you have questions and or comments, because we want to have it not just the four of us talking, but we're trying to create an opportunity for you to also contribute, find questions, because I always have a ton of questions, but it's not just about me, it's about you too. And to that end, Jessica gave me a really, I think, inspiring idea this morning. Why don't, if you find it hard to like raise your hand or just sort of come on and talk, sometimes you have a hard time like trying to find, well, where can I get in? I have something to say, and then if you don't get it out, then maybe you forget it or something. There's this thing called a chat box. You can put it in there. And also, if you hear something that spurs you, you can also use those emoji things that you can sort of like smile, or yeah, there you go. Like look at Jessica, she did a thumbs up thing. So you can do that too. But this is interactive, and however you like to interact, then do that, because this is also for you. Okay, so that's my soapbox for this morning. Let's talk about the consortia. Can someone give us a thumbnail sketch? Because I know there's a lot of rich history just with the consortia. But can someone tell us what it's about, how it got started, and where you see it going? What's its purpose in life?
I can start out by talking a little bit about the history of the Lakota Language Consortium, and then I think Alan and Shania have both been involved in like the actual history of it as well, long before I came along. And so I think that I can speak to that, and they can jump in and add anything since it's a conversation. So really, the Lakota Language Consortium began as a dream of teachers on Pine Ridge Reservation around 2002. So there was a number of language teachers in schools affiliated with the Loneman School and the Shannon County schools that were struggling with the teaching of Lakota language to the youth. And so they were looking for help and outside resources to improve the teaching of the language. So there were several heads of the Lakota language departments, Leonard Littlefinger, Robert Two Crow, and they reached out to the Oglala Nation Education Coalition, which is, it's a long, there's a lot of long names involved in this. And so they began working to create a plan to move forward the language curriculum across all the schools that the coalition represented. In doing that, they invited outside experts to contribute to the plan, which was how Indiana University got involved. And the goal was to build a curriculum and resources that made it possible for language learners to have like high quality printed materials. A lot of the materials that existed beforehand or that were being used in schools were like photocopies of photocopies, so they were older materials, copyright questions, things like that. So these meetings resulted in a partnership between Indiana University and the Oglala Nation Education Coalition. And they kept trying to, like many things that happen in tribal communities, is that folks were doing their best to try to get this going, but sometimes things just don't come of these like grand plans that we have. So after a few years of running around with it, they ended up founding the Lakota Language Consortium. Leonard Littlefinger was one of the key folks that got involved in that. And the goal of it was really to work with, more academic linguists to develop textbooks for community members authors. And, that year, the first textbook came together for the Wounded Knee School District and the Loneman School District. And then it was published a year later. So it's very exciting to see that, come together over time. So now we have a catalog of materials for language learners that are not only 5 traditional textbooks that are used in classrooms. There's also a grammar book. We're in the process of waiting on the print copies of our new Lakota dictionary to come out that has over 40,000 words in it. And then there's a plethora of digital apps, from digital online dictionary that people can access for free to Awoksape, which is a learning platform, and so on. And so really the commitment of the consortium and its board is to make sure that materials are accessible to people for free or low cost, and that people really can use them for their language journey. And I think that Alan can probably speak longer term to what it looks like, what people's language journeys look like, because that's a whole other aspect of this. So, but the consortium still we're regularly working on new materials for folks. We regularly work with first language speakers to help identify gaps that are existing in schools and in the community. And we take feedback from the community to make new materials that they request as well. So.
Alan, you wanted to add on to what Jamie was talking about in terms of the consortium and where it's going, what it does?
Yeah. So I wouldn't be here if it was for the consortium, right? They offered a lot of really good courses and materials. I wouldn't be as proficient as I am in Lakota had it not been for the materials and the trainings I've had with the consortium. I've taught a lot of language weekends, and all the training that I have as a teacher came from the methods courses they offered. So I'm really grateful for that. It's really helped me in my language journey as well. It's just amazing to meet a lot of people along the way, along this journey. It's been about 7 years for me, 8 years learning, and it's been really awesome so far. I got to meet Shania and Jamie along the way, and many others. Alex Fire Thunder is a good friend of mine as well. It's been it's been a really good program, and it's really helped a lot of people. And for sure, I've actually had I'm a director now, Lakota Language Program Director. So I've actually had my staff actually attend some of the trainings that I went through to sort of clone myself, if you will, to get them out there. And because we really need younger teachers and learners. That is a huge demand, not just here in Rollspud, but on all Lakota speaking reservations and Dakota speaking reservations at that. So it's something that I'm glad to be able to help with in that sense now as a director, to really push to get this out there. So yeah, that's what my program's been doing. We're going to see how because I run a K-12 program, we're going to see how it works this coming year, actually. So we got some fresh blood.
Well, I'm hoping, I want to get back to that K-12 program and what you're doing with that, but I want to give Shania a chance to talk about it too, because you said you're a language learner right now, right, Shania?
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the journey of a language learner? I mean, I think that the teachers have their own journey, but I'd like to start with the language learner. Can you talk a little bit about what it feels like to learn the language, and also some of the challenges, and then we can maybe speak to, well, what are you doing about the challenges and what's your journey like with that? But could you just talk to us about being a language learner?
Being a learner was actually much different than I expected. Usually, like in the preliminary conversations and the day-to-day conversations that we have about language, we kind of have this stigma around it, or that it's going to be like this. And a lot of people have like the conversation where they're going to speak out in the wild and they're hearing people say, you're not saying it right. Or there's this discouraging like thought around language. So after getting or going to my first class and hearing my grandpa speak and hearing Alan speak, and there was such passion and it was fun, I was so surprised. I was like, this is not how I expected language to be. And that everyone in the room was passionate and they all wanted like a similar thing. It also felt like this like really big weight was lifted off to know that I was a part of a community instead of like, you have to save your language, which is a part of the narrative that you hear a lot of. But some of my struggles as a language learner, you know, having those preliminary conversations and not really knowing what it was, I thought that, or I didn't understand the kind of the plus sides of like having consistent materials and using a consistent orthography. I thought, what is this H? Like, what is, why is it written like that? Like, why does it look like that? And then after studying it, like, I realized that our language does deserve to have like this high importance. It doesn't have to look like English. I was comparing it constantly to English, thinking that, you know, it had to have like this English orthography. Like I was constantly translating it into stuff that made sense to me as an English speaker. But then after like all these encouraging conversations, you know, like the patience and like the community that came along with a lot of this stuff, it really helped. And taking some of these classes with LLC, especially learning the grammar classes, it all kind of clicked. I was like, I don't have to think in English. I'm like, this is its whole own thing, like incredibly important. And it really helped too, because there was a lot of people that weren't afraid to make mistakes. And they constantly told us that, like, are you scolding babies? Like, are you telling them, no, it's like this? Or, but there's all that like patience and like encouragement that came along with this that I really didn't expect. But so I guess the struggle would have been the orthography and kind of keeping up that passion outside of the classroom is very hard, that personal responsibility. But I don't know, there's seeing seeing my grandpa, I think like some of the realities of life, like it's very hard to see people you love getting older. So it's like that kind of that urgency, like I have to speak, this person is here, like they're like a resource. But I'm really thankful for all these like materials that exist so that I can go home and I can talk to my grandpa and have these personal conversations. And it opens up this whole other world. So I think like, I don't know, there isn't as many struggles as I expected. I think it just opened up a whole new world. But as a learner, I think I guess another struggle would be like feeling like you don't belong. You see like these amazing people who are spouting off all this Lakota and they're just going. But then actually having a conversation with these people and they're actually like accessible and humble and like, oh, you're not there yet, let me help you. Like that has been one of the like huge aspects that has kept me coming back. I'm like, you're way up here, but you're not above having these simple conversations with me or like asking my name, where I'm from, what I drank. And it's like, you guys are having these philosophical conversations, but I'm like, you still take the time to invite me in. I'm like, that's really nice.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting when you mention that, especially the part about, you know, people having, let's say, discussions about which way is the right way or what's the real meaning of those words, you know. And for the person just really starting out, that could be like not only mind-boggling but discouraging, you know, because you have a sense that nobody really knows how to say it, you know, is it even a thing? And I remember, I'm reminded of like, you know, I grew up in San Francisco and I had a lot of Chinese friends. And I'm always reminded of, to me, they were like hilarious arguments that they would have, almost sometimes to a point of fistfights over how a word should be said in just one dialect of Chinese, like, you know, and it's like, oh, it's samyap, no, say up, you know, it's like, what, you know, like, it's both are right. But for them, they weren't having it. It's like there's only one way to say it, is our way or the highway. You guys have no idea what you're doing, you know? So I could see how like having a class where there's like, okay, it may be wrong over here, but whatever's wrong over here is right over someplace else. We're just going to do it that way here. And then if you don't get it, then, well, we'll pray for you, you know, or something like that, you know. But
Well,
I
there's
imagine
that, and with Lakota, it's interesting too. I'll just share is that, you know, you have different generations of people learning Lakota as well. And so because of the history of the United States, one of the things that's challenging is that you have the boarding school era, which really disrupted language from being passed from generation to generation. And so when, depending on the age of the speaker that you're talking to and having a conversation with, and the region that they're from, you'll have different words that come up or different ways that we say things. And so it gets really complex in Lakota communities where people have, you know, we get really passionate. We're passionate people as it is. And we're also adamant because of course we're right. And so there's times where, you know, people will get into these like heated discussions about it should be done this way, it should be done that way. And it is a reality of everyone's right. One of the teachers that I really enjoy learning from is Naomi Lasworth, and she is down on Pine Ridge. She's Oglala, and she says, you know, when you have an elder enter into the room, you have to recognize that anything that they say is what they learned. This is how they grew up. This is their lived experience, and they're right. Like there's not questioning who they are and, you know, how they said things. This is their life. And so I really love when she teaches in the classroom and opens with that reminder for everybody, because it really isn't up for debate.
well, and that's such an important thing, whether you're a language learner or not, is to realize that people speak from their personal reality. And outside of that, I won't say it's impossible, but my experience is that it's difficult for almost all of us to like speak from someone else's reality. The question is, can we absorb, how much of their reality can we absorb? And, you know, even understanding the basics of language, which even in our native language, we never talk about what is language, you know? What is this vocalization of shared experiences? That kind of concept never comes into just basic English class. It's like all of these words, they're just arbitrary vocalizations, noises that we make to represent some kind of idea of feeling. The word itself doesn't have any meaning, except the meaning that we share between us as to what it means. It doesn't come with, you know, if you said egg beater to a person who's never seen an egg beater or an egg, that would have no meaning to them, you know, at all. Even if that was the native language that they spoke, it would have no meaning. And to someone who speaks another language, you just make it, you know, you could be Bob Dylan, you know, nobody would know what you're talking about.
Well, and even as an organization like Lakota Language Consortium, like early on in the early years, they really spoke to like language revitalization, and they spoke to these topics on language loss. And an aspect of the work that they did early on was really educating the public about like how native languages are being lost, why they need to be revitalized, like the importance of those things happening. And when you speak to Shania's grandfather, Ben Blackbear, he has a lot of philosophy on this, and he pointed out to us in the past year that he was like, we really need to update the verbiage that we're using, because really the language, like when you talk about, you have a 40,000 word dictionary, 5 textbooks, a grammar book, like it's pretty clear that the language is not in the state of it being like lost per se. And it's really being maintained. Like there's neologisms being added, which is really the concept of making sure there's a word to describe modern concepts. Like there's words for computer and cell phone and things like that. And so when you really think about it, it's like, this is not really a lost language per se. This is a really active living language. We actively have discussions in it. There's things written. And I think one of the objectives that we're really focused on right now is encouraging people to not only, like Shania was talking about, take on a personal learning journey, but then in addition to that, like start writing about your life in Lakota. Like start writing down today's experiences, things about going to the grocery store, cleaning your house, tidying up. Like these seem like very mundane things, but we can be using our language everywhere in life. And so that's what Shania and I really focus on when we work together at the Lakota Language Consortium, is like, how can we encourage people to find ways to move Lakota language from, being in a textbook and, being this kind of like academic philosophical like thing, and having it be integrated into our daily lives. And it's something that she and I both struggle with, like in our own journeys. Like sometimes we get wrapped up too in the process of like making content for Lakota Language Consortium. We don't always sit back and say, hey, I'm going to take 30 minutes and like do some self-study today to work on something, and so it's interesting to be on your own language journey while also trying to support the language learning community and encouraging people in that way. So it's kind of a twofold, it's hard. It's a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's multifaceted. I want to take a little break here and encourage our other esteemed panelists to join in this conversation. Does anyone have a question or a comment? I want to open it up to people, or whether you put it in the chat or you just sort of open up unmute your microphone, and if you have something to share. Kevin, you got your mic unmuted. You want to join us? There we go.
I'm interested that, I took Spanish in college up at SDSU in Brookings, and some of the high schools offered Spanish, some French, some German, and those were the three offerings mainly in college. And I always thought it was interesting that I grew up on a farm on the Lower Brule Reservation surrounded by Lakota people, and nowhere could I take Lakota language. I was using, and at that time there weren't very many Spanish people in South Dakota. There are many, many more now, which is wonderful. But Germans, French, and I wonder, I would have loved the opportunity to have some of that, and how that might have improved my understanding of Lakota people growing up. And I wonder if that ever struck you as strange that we have these languages that we're taught, and yet we're surrounded by people who spoke a different language and had great significance to us that we were never given an opportunity to understand or often even hear.
I mean, I think it's fascinating how, and not just in South Dakota, but all over the country. I mean, right now there's 568 federally recognized tribes, and most of those tribes have their own language, or they share a language with, tribes in their region. And so I find it fascinating that this is not more accessible in the school system. I find that it's not accessible, in many regions, like at the college level as well. And so, I think that we're moving towards again, like, as we talk about what we hope to see for the future, we hope that these programs become more accessible. Like, you can take Lakota language and culture classes at a variety of the colleges, like Sitting Bull College, Black Hills State, Sigashu University. So there's a variety of places that you can now access this. A lot of this is limited to tribal colleges. But when you are in a region, obviously it's amazing if we can start to see more curriculum, being adapted for people to have access to, take a class like this. And, as you really look at education in general, for Native people or even non-Native people, the challenge with education today is we don't always make space for those academic experiences. And then the workload of young people and students in general, their workload is so heavy that if that time isn't carved out inside of the curriculum that they're already going through, they really don't have the time to take that on as well. And so, we want to see more curriculum like that in the schools, and the more accessibility to students at any level. That way they can just be able to be immersed in it. And even in the K through 12, and Alan can probably speak to this better than I can, but oftentimes in K through 12 programs as well, even on, even on homelands, like on the Rosewood Reservation, on Oglala Lakota land, you're really running into situations where even in tribal schools, there's a limit to 1 to 3 hours a week of education, and so there's obviously folks already working on this and encouraging legislation and going to education committees to say, how do we get more time in the classroom where not only Native students, but non-Native students have the option to spend more time learning the language, and we can increase classroom hours. So I think it's fascinating. I mean, I think there are linguistics, Native linguistics all over the country that would love to see more programs offered so that people can actually learn Native languages. So.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Are there other folks who might have a question or comment? Anyone else? Anybody else?
There's a comment in the chat, Lawrence, so I'll just read that really quick.
Sure.
It's from Melinda, and she says, I really like Jamie's comment about the language not really being lost, but rather how you are working to maintain it. Can you tell us about your summer institute, the types of people who are attending, and how they will benefit and carry what they learn out into the world beyond the time they spend at the summer institute?
Sure. And Shania can speak to this too, but I'm going to let her speak to it specifically because she's been involved with more summer institutes. But I want to make sure that I add that we're actually stepping out of summer institute right now, where Alan's been teaching for the past 2 weeks. So is Shania. So summer institute is happening right now. Tomorrow's the last day, and it's been going for the past, 2 weeks. So, but Shania, I'll let you take that one on.
So the types of people are attending are just people that have like this personal passion for Lakota language. And one of the cool things, like any event with LLC, has been really arming people with like the materials or the support that they need. And one of the biggest methods of support is the actual people that are attending. So these people are making connections with each other, making study groups, they know they're making these connections with all these people. They may have something in common, they may not, maybe on Facebook, Zoom, wherever it may be. But that has been the method, and really kind of driving home that this is one event, and the thing that's going to really get you to where you want to be in the language is going to be that everyday study. And having these support systems, so you don't feel like you're dealing with the heavy weight of Lakota language revitalization. But yeah, Alan.
Okay. So basically, as a Lakota language instructor, what my ultimate goal is to inspire people. Learning a language it can be difficult for a lot, especially as adult. We do have some barriers that children don't, but we also have some advantages, but the main thing is to empower people. That's my main thing. Is we can learn a language, we're going to make mistakes, nobody's perfect, and that's something I really reinforce in my classrooms, to make it a safe place to make these mistakes. We're learning. I still make mistakes. It's just part of us as human beings. We're gonna make mistakes no matter what we do. And again, just having that safety net and being like, hey, listen, we're gonna get this. I'm gonna be here with you, and I'm gonna help you along the way, and we'll get through this. But again, just finding them to, one of the activities I do is I have them at the end of the first week is they write out everything they learned about themselves, and it's basically a whole paragraph about themselves in Lakota. And it's really empowering to be like, wow, I never thought I'd be able to do that by the end of the week. So there's a lot of other activities. I also bring a lot of humor to my classes too, and just make it just an easy learning environment, really. And I remind them, some of these sounds, sounds in Lakota aren't found in English, and we are gonna struggle with them, and that's because we probably never made them before. So that's part of the learning process. There's a few other things just as a teacher. you know, that just evaluating them and checking them, you know, how much do you understand on 1 to 5, you know, 3, or that you're halfway there, 5, you got it, 1, you're lost, you know, just technically, you know, evaluating them all the time and seeing where they're at and helping them along the way. And like Shania had said, you know, it's like, I always tell this story about my daughter when she was, you know, a toddler. She was saying chicken nuggets, right, for like a week or 2. And I never sat her down and I was like, it's chicken nuggets, you know, like I never would have done that. But I thought it was the cutest thing. And she knew that, you know, because kind of snickered, and she like changed it to chicken nuggets, you know, like within a couple of weeks. It's just that small little time frame though that I remember of her doing that. That is just amazing. And so like, that's what I tell my students, you know, I'm gonna help you along the way. And don't beat yourself up if you don't get it right away. You know, again, we're human, and we're not gonna, you know, we're not geniuses. We're not gonna have it perfect the first 3-4 times we do it, you know. So if anything, I would say the Lakota Summer Institutes, like they were for me, I want to give back and empower people as well, to let them know that they can learn Lakota, that it is possible, that it's just really awesome to interact and speak, and you know how powerful that is for all of us involved in the journey.
Lee Raines.
Yes, I've been having trouble getting on, but I just wanted to say thank you very much. I have a couple of questions and suggestions. Learning a new language. In South Dakota, I think it was you, Kevin, said, you know, having few choices. Well, there weren't any languages in my high school at all. And I went to college and I only had a little bit of money and I really couldn't afford another, well, whatever. And so at age 80, I decided to learn a language. So I started doing, it's called Duolingo. And so I was starting with Spanish because I do have friends that have that language. And one of the things I really did learn was it is important you are listening to it with another person in a conversation in your learning experience. So many of these high schools, basically a few years ago, they told about the structure and everything, but there was no communication. And that communication is so powerful. And so I would suggest that there might be a directive that they must visit and live among the people to learn their cultures, because just learning a language without understanding the cultures is an empty gesture, because you learn so much about the cultures. And I would love to learn the Lakota language. I would just love it. But I have been trying to learn Spanish. So I joined a group that was formed here, and we went to this little restaurant owned by somebody that spoke Spanish. He was the nicest person, and he brought me my margaritas every single day. And
Language learning aid, that's a language learning aid. Margaritas, I'll help you get your Spanish going good.
well, yes, well, we got our conversation. But anyway, the conversation really did help. And hats off for you to bringing up the subject. I am such a proponent of this, because having a different language puts up a fence, a barrier in our communities. I hear this, excuse me, many times. Oh, that's all you hear, all these languages. Yeah, well, we got all of them. Yeah, them. It puts up something, my feathers are raised or whatever, but thank you very much for what you brought up today. Thank you. I finally got it going together. I'm not very knowledgeable.
Very good points. Very good. Thank you, Lee. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Could I just follow up with a question?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
How does you know, I'm Bohemian and Irish, and I don't know either Gaelic or Czechoslovakian, and I'm not really interested in knowing either one. But maybe that's my short-sightedness. I did really enjoy my 2 years of Spanish, and I think it helped me in many ways. How does this benefit the Lakota culture and Lakota people to have this language survive and be part of daily life beyond just being able to talk to each other? What does it do for the culture?
I'll take this one. So a lot of it, when I teach, a lot of it like in person, it's a little hard to duplicate online, but in person, a lot of the activities we do are really centered around Lakota culture, you know, just introducing ourselves to using relative terms, to general sayings, you know, how interactions are. A lot of it is it's all rooted in cultural interactions, actually. So that is part of it. So really, you know, we can't really separate language and culture. It's really part of it. You know, like when just talking about the word "waitecha," you know, that word, generally, commonly people think it means like leftovers, you know, but it doesn't. It actually means new food, right? Waitecha. And techa means new, and wa is kind of like a contraction of food, boite. So wa techa means, and it kind of goes back to when we used to hunt buffalo, right? So we would get a kill and we would say, let's go get some new food to take back, right? So wa techa, right? And so that's what it meant. It was new meat to cure, to you know, cook. It doesn't necessarily mean leftovers in the sense that, you know, the old Chinese food I had last night, you know, or something like that. You know, it doesn't really mean like that. So there's other little things like this and other words in Lakota that have these deeper meanings as well. That I really love to, you know, if there's a etymology class, I'd love to explore that. But I do incorporate a lot of that into my class as well, and we do discuss some of these things, and especially if students have questions. I usually tell them I don't have all the answers. I probably never will, but I can help us in some way, you know. But definitely, yeah. So a lot of, you know, it's huge. Language is a huge part of who we are. It's also, you know, in our tribal government systems, it's also there too, and it needs to be, for us to be federally recognized, so to an extent. So it is very, very important for us. And the programs and what Lakota Language Consortium has done is provide training to develop younger teachers and speakers with the help of bridging the language from the elders, first language speakers, down to the children. And that is super needed right now, to have that interaction between elders and children, with adult learners and teachers being the bridge, if you will. So yeah, even like a lot of songs that we have too are also incorporated into our learning as well. Usually with visuals, and you know, there's a few other things, but it really helps build on literacy and a few other things. But it's super important, I believe. So thank you for your question.
Well, and
You know,
I'll just
oh.
jump in and add, I know we're coming to the end of our time together, but I just want to jump in and add, like, for individual learners, it's a really emotional journey. Like, as a Lakota person learning your language, when we have people in the classroom, it becomes like there's a pause for them. And while there are non-native folks that will join the classes and learn the language as well, for Native folks to enter into this journey is deeply emotional. And it is, you know, something that is heavy when they enter into the classroom. And so they come into the classroom with a lot of anticipation. And so instructors like Alan really set them at ease to let them know, you know, like Shania pointed out, like, you're not going to get scolded. You're not going to we're not going to chastise you if you aren't perfect the first time you say it. And, you know, so that plays an important part too, in people being able to have a comfortable and safe space to be able to connect with the culture without feeling like they aren't welcome or that they aren't invited. And so that plays a big tie to culture as well.
Before we go any further, I would like one of you or to put in the chat one, your website, and then two, some kind of contact information. in case anyone on this call or on Facebook or wherever else this program ends up wants to get involved with learning the language, they'll have a way to do that, at least the first, as they say in the space agency, the first contact, so that we can follow through. And something that I think would be almost remiss if I didn't mention is something that's alluded to, but not maybe necessarily said, is how important it is for the follow-up. If you learn things, to be able to practice it, because you have to get out of your head, so to speak, and that whole translation thing. And the only way that I've ever found to do that is to have ample time where you say it in a conversation or in an active mode enough where you're not thinking, oh, this word means this in English and now it means that in Lakota. It's just you say it, or to the point that you dream in the language as being a target. So there's no cognitive processing happening. It comes from that emotional space where your native language comes from. And you can only do that by having mutual experiences where you're speaking from an experiential base instead of just a cognitive academic base. Boy, we're getting this hour is wrapping up really fast, and there's so much more that I would like to talk about. And there are things I think in the chat, but we probably won't have much time to explore them. I want to give this last minute or so to our guests. Is there anything that you would like to impart, something you would like to say before we end our session here today?
I guess I can add that if, we dropped our contact information into here. So if you guys ever want to follow up or have questions after this session, if you're watching it a time down the road, I think that just we can always use the support in supporting native languages. And, we appreciate people that take an interest in it. And, I would just encourage you that if you entered into a space where natives are learning their language and you want to be a part of that as a non-native, that is a space that is welcome. We just ask that you guys, as you enter in, recognize that this is deeply personal journeys that are taking place. And so, it's a good idea to, if you're entering into that space, do your research before you enter into them and make sure that you're aware of the people and the land and some of the history associated with natives. We love having visitors and guests come into these spaces and learn. Our elders wanted to make sure that these materials were accessible to all people that wanted to learn Lakota. And so we hope that if you have an interest in it, that you'll start your personal journey.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. Just wanted to say that there's quite a few free resources that I suggest everyone take advantage of. We have the Awoke Sape app. We have the dictionary app, which right now is free, and on Android it's like 49 cents. Also on Spotify, if you look up Lakota Language Consortium, you'll have hours and hours and hours of Lakota conversation available. Also check out the YouTube. There's a lot of free resources there. There's a few children's books, there's children's songs. The Berenstein Bears and Lakota are all on there. Taking advantage of these in the medium that you're most comfortable, but listening to Spotify, go drive down the road and learn Lakota. All very accessible, looking up Lakota language in these various places.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Yeah, I seen Sherilyn had a comment in chat. Is there potential for weekend retreats? There are Lakota language weekends that we have every so often. I think there's the next one's in Denver, maybe. I'm not sure. Jamie or them would. Yeah, Jamie will be able to answer that one. But I just want to say thank you for giving us the time of day today, and I really appreciate it. And I'm really glad to be here. And yeah, I'm just awesome to be here, really.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're at the end of our program. I want to give people one last chance on the chat. If there's 3 little dots down at the right-hand corner on the bottom there. If you click on that, you can copy that, or just select it all and copy and paste it somewhere on your computer. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us today and sharing this really important mission. There's so much more that we could cover today on language learning. But, one last thing. You have a website. If you want to like include that Lakota poetry film on there, please do so. If you need some special permissions or something, email me and we'll get that done. But I think that I think that would be interesting for your language learners to hear that. And we'll talk more about that offline.
That sounds
Thank
good.
you. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We'll see you next week, same time, same station. Bye-bye.